We have to accept, and I'm sure you do, and so do most listeners, that we're in a strategic competition with Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. And although it's not quite a Cold War, we're in what is known as Grayzone warfare. It's not a Cold War because we're in a contested but connected world. It's not the same as it was during the Cold War.
Russian ships have been seen in British waters 40 times since the invasion of Ukraine, which of course began in 2022. It comes after a Russian research and intelligence vessel passed through British waters earlier this week. A Royal Navy submarine sent a warning to the ship, which was spotted loitering. I say suspiciously spotted loitering near vital undersea cables. Let's listen to what John Healey, the Defence Secretary, had to say to Times Radio Breakfast earlier today.
What we do when they come anywhere near Britain is to make sure we track them closely. I wanted to signal that very clearly to President Putin, which is why this week I confirmed that I'd authorised just before Christmas, when this Russian spy ship Yantar was in our waters, for one of our UK submarines to surface close by to warn them off. And in many ways, it underlines what I'm announcing today, because the manufacturing here in Derby gives us the submarines and the hard power we need to defend Britain and defend our seas.
Well, let's now speak with Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, who's a former NATO commander. Rear Admiral, welcome to the show. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good afternoon.
So, how seriously do you think President Putin will take our warnings?
Not very. He'll just continue with what he's invited his Navy and his auxiliaries to do for the past 10 years, in fact. I wrote a book in 2014 called Superhighway, and I raised the issue of our underwater infrastructure being very vulnerable. It was given a stiff ignoring by most of our politicians right up until the start of the Ukraine war, when Russia and China, by the way, not just Russia, started taking an excessive interest in those pipelines and communications cables and power cables that pass underneath the ocean. I think we've got to be clear, though. These intelligence vessels aren't operating in UK territorial waters. That's the waters out to 12 miles. They're operating in our economic zone, which goes out to 200 miles. And ships have quite a lot of license to do what they like in that space between 12 and 200 miles. As long as they don't actually interfere with that infrastructure, they can actually do what they like. So we've got to be very careful we don't breach international law here.
And the Defence Secretary announced this £9 billion deal with Rolls-Royce to bolster support to the Royal Navy's fleet of nuclear submarines. Is that the right approach? Is that enough?
Well, I don't know why he's announcing it as a boost or an addition. It's simply the money required to keep our fleet of nuclear submarines going. Rolls-Royce provide the power systems, the nuclear reactor and the associated systems. It's rather like you and I saying, look, we're going to have to pay money to keep our car going. I'm afraid to say, like the incident in the Channel, it's making a mountain out of a molehill. They were right to highlight what the Yantar has been doing, and also some of its sort of sister ships. And I should add that the Russians have a whole fleet of underwater submarines dedicated to interfering with the seabed. They were right to highlight that. It was a very odd one to highlight, as the Yantar was simply transiting through the Channel from the Mediterranean to its home base in Murmansk. So we've got to be very careful that we don't overreact here, because President Putin will say, well, actually, I've just seen one of my auxiliaries on a simple passage from A to B get a frigate, a patrol vessel, and a nuclear submarine out. Well, we couldn't sustain that if he keeps sending auxiliaries through the Channel just on a transit from A to B. Okay. So we've got to calibrate our response a bit more carefully.
And Chris, one of our listeners just messaged in saying, don't forget the UK and Western partners are doing exactly the same thing in Russian/international waters like the Russians are doing. One must be careful when it comes to propaganda. There are two sides. What would you say to that listener?
There's no doubt that we're involved in intelligence activities that relate to obviously trying to gain intelligence about Chinese, Russian, Iranian, North Korean capabilities. I don't think we have vessels that are specifically tasked with interfering and potentially threatening underwater infrastructure. So I think it's slightly different. Of course, we have submarines in looking at Russia's Northern Fleet. We've got them in the South and East China Sea. Even when we sort of intercept vessels like the Yantar, our warships are looking for signals and communications intelligence, and also looking to see what kit they've got on board.
Okay.
That's been going on for the best part of 60 years. You know, I used to do it on a routine basis during the Cold War. And we have to accept, and I'm sure you do, and so do most listeners, that, you know, we're in a strategic competition with Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. And although it's not quite a Cold War, you know, we're in what is known as Grayzone warfare. It's not a Cold War because we're in a contested but connected world. It's not the same as it was during the Cold War.
Well, it might not be a Cold War, but it feels like it's certainly a very serious case of the sniffles. Chris, thanks so much for your time. That's Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, who is a former NATO commander. Right, now it's time for this.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, shortly after I win the presidency, I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine settled, and it would have never happened. It would have never, ever happened if I was there. I used to talk to Putin about it. I've said it very openly. I talked to him about it. It was the apple of his eye. I said, don't do it, Vladimir. Don't do it, Vladimir. So we have a very good relationship. And I also have a very good relationship, as you know, with President Putin. And I think if we win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly. I really think we're going to get it resolved.
I hope we have more good relations.
We're going to have, oh, I see.
Yeah.
Mr. President, please, can you have a look this way?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President.
This way, please.
Please, Mr. President.
To your right.
President. Yes. Thank you.
I mean, they happen to be over at Minster. We're going to see. We're going to be talking. We'll be talking to President Putin, and we'll be talking to the representatives, Zelensky and representatives from Ukraine. We got to stop it. It's carnage.
Что мы можем предложить, или я могу предложить президенту, вновь избранному президенту Трампу, когда мы с ним встретимся? Ну, во-первых, я не знаю, когда мы с ним встретимся, да, потому что он об этом ничего не говорит. Я с ним вообще не разговаривал более 4 лет, и я готов к этому, конечно, в любое время, и готов буду и ко встрече, если он захочет этого.
The United States finally and officially recognized Jerusalem as the true capital of Israel. And I will stop the chaos in the Middle East. There's another thing. Israel, October 7th. October 7th would have never happened. All of those people that were hostages hopefully are still, because I hope they're of hostage. I just hope they haven't been killed, but I think a lot of them are killed. All hell will break out. If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out. I don't have to say anymore, but that's what it is. And they should have given them back a long time. They should have never taken them. They should have never been the attack of October 7th. People forget that. The Iranian regime supports terrorism and exports violence, bloodshed, and chaos across the Middle East. That is why we must put an end to Iran's continued aggression and nuclear ambitions. They have not lived up to the spirit of their agreement. 241 Americans. I am announcing today that we cannot and will not make this certification. We will not continue down a path whose predictable conclusion is more violence, more terror, and the very real threat of Iran's nuclear breakout. That is why I am directing my administration to work closely with Congress and our allies to address the deal's many serious flaws so that the Iranian regime can never threaten the world with nuclear weapons. The deal lifted crippling economic sanctions. In a few moments, I will sign a presidential memorandum to begin reinstating U.S. nuclear sanctions on the Iranian regime. We will be instituting the highest level of economic sanction. Any nation that helps Iran in its quest for nuclear weapons could also be strongly sanctioned by the United States. America will not be held hostage to nuclear blackmail. They asked him, what do you think about Iran? Would you hit Iran? And he goes, as long as they don't hit the nuclear stuff. That's the thing you want to hit, right? I said, I think he's got that one wrong. Isn't that what you're supposed to hit? And I have respect for Iran. I have respect for the people. I know a lot of Iranian people. They're very smart, actually great negotiators, great business people. They're great people. They're very warm people. I wanted to do, as a country, I wanted to do great. Now it's, in its own way, it's probably in danger, maybe more so than they would have thought a month ago, right, with what's happening. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. We have, between us, and we have to include some other countries which would quickly come in. We have capacity in the United States, knowing that the United States really has to. Our meeting last night was absolutely 20-25 minutes because I was traveling and it was so nice. We just imposed $200 billion at 25%. It just went on. It actually kicks in on January 1st to 25%. It starts off at 10%, but shortly thereafter goes to 25%. And if there's a retaliation against our farmers and our industrial workers, our ranchers, if any of that goes on, we're going to kick in another $257 billion. And that'll be also at 25%, which we don't want to do, but we probably will have no choice. We will be going back, I will be going back to Washington right after this dinner. Would be a great thing. We'll be discussing trade. And I think at some point we are going to end up doing something which is great for China and great for the United States. We're going to, I charged China. China was charged by me hundreds of billions of dollars over the last few years that we were in the administration. In fact, Biden hasn't been able to get rid of them because they make so much damn money they can't justify getting rid of them. He'd love to because they paid him a lot of money, China. They've given him a lot of money.
关于你的第一个问题，首先我们不回答这个假设性的问题，但是作为原则，我愿意重申，贸易战不会有赢家，也不利于世界。关于台湾问题，台湾问题是中美关系中最重要、最敏感的问题。中国坚决反对任何形式的美台官方往来，这一立场是一贯明确的。美国政府应当恪守一个中国原则和中美3个联合公报，慎重处理涉台问题，以免严重损害中美关系和台海和平稳定。
We don't need anything they have. We don't need their dairy products. We have more than they have. We don't need anything. So why are we losing $200 billion a year and more to protect Canada? And I said that to, as I called him, Governor Trudeau. I said, listen, what would happen if we didn't subsidize you, if we didn't, because we give them a lot of money.
Executive order are you planning to do on executive order when it comes to immigration? And
economic force, because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like. And it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada.
Bonjour tout le monde. I had a good call with Donald Trump last night again. We obviously talked about laying out the facts, talking about how the intense and effective connections between our two countries flow back and forth. We talked about some of the challenges that we can work on together. It was a good call. This is something that we can do. Laying out the facts, moving forward in constructive ways. This is a relationship that we know takes a certain amount of working on, and that's what we'll do.
Before it started, I can tell you that. The deal could have been made just by an average deal maker. Deal could have been made on that. And Mexico has to stop allowing millions of people to pour into our country. They can stop them. And we're going to put very serious tariffs on Mexico and Canada, because Canada, they come through Canada too. And the drugs that are coming through are at record numbers, record numbers.
Nos vamos a poner de acuerdo. Yo estoy convencida, defendiendo nuestra soberanía, con el respeto a las y los mexicanos, con el respeto a México y en la colaboración que tiene que tener un gobierno con otro y un socio comercial con otro, tan importantes socios comerciales. Entonces, si llegara a ocurrir, de todas maneras, tenemos plan. Pero el objetivo es que no ocurra.
We're going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, which has a beautiful ring that covers a lot of territory. The Gulf of America, what a beautiful name. And it's appropriate. It's appropriate. The U.S. is currently paying much more than any other nation, and that is not fair to the United States or the United States taxpayer. Billion, but it's $33 billion as of today. Well, I think NATO should have 5%, yeah. Well, you can't do it at 2%. I mean, at 2%, every country, if you're going to have a country in a regular military, you're at 4%. I think they should be, you know, they're in dangerous territory. I think it should be, they can all afford it, but they should be at 5%, not 2%. I'm the one that got them to pay 2%. In order to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens, the United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord
We've ended the war on beautiful, clean coal, and it's just been announced that a second brand new coal mine where they're going to take out clean coal, meaning they're taking out coal, they're going to clean it, is opening in the state of Pennsylvania.
And it's the most expensive energy there is. It's many, many times more expensive than clean natural gas. So we're going to try and have a policy where no windmills are being built. That's all I want. I never talked about spending more money necessarily than President Biden's actions yesterday on offshore drilling, banning offshore drilling. Will not stand. I will reverse it immediately. It'll be done immediately. And we will drill, baby, drill. And we're going to be drilling in a lot of other locations, and the energy costs are going to come way down.
Because we're being ripped off at the Panama Canal like we're being ripped off everywhere else. A secure, he just said take it back. That's a good idea.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you. Look, the Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. And we gave the Panama Canal to Panama. We didn't give it to China. And they've abused it. They've abused that gift. It should have never been made, by the way. Giving the Panama Canal is why Jimmy Carter lost the election, in my opinion. Just leave it in